Hello everybody, Dr. Mike here out of Functionised Integrative Therapeutics, naturally right here in Colts Neck, New Jersey. So, we're going to jump right into it. Today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the chiropractic adjustment, I guess, per se. A little bit about what that popping or cracking noise is. But much more specifically, I want to answer a question that I get asked routinely, which mostly comes down to, is it safe and effective to self-adjust or to self-crack or pop your own body, such as your neck, your shoulders, your fingers, anything and all in between? So to really answer that, let's go ahead and quickly give a little bit of what exactly is a chiropractic adjustment and what is that darn popping noise. So chiropractors spend many years in school, 4 years undergrad, 4 years to graduate school to learn all the in-depth science of the anatomy, neurological, musculoskeletal systems, and to gain the skills that are required to give a nice, safe, yet fast impulse to adjust or mobilize different joints, again, whether it's the spine or extremities. So during the tenure in education, a big thing that we do is learn how to tell specifically what direction a joint or a spot in the spine has to move. Is it rotated? Is it laterally bending? Is it flexed forward? Etc. Because the direction that a bone moves certainly matters. So typically when we get adjusted, we hear this, the characteristic popping noise. It's not a requirement to have a successful adjustment, but a lot of people do kind of correlate it with that. I know especially early on, whether I'm being adjusted or I was learning to adjust, that noise was kind of a little satisfaction. Though, everyone has a different view on it. I know there's been several people that's come and gone that don't like the popping noise, especially when their neck. Or we'll get into this a little bit more shortly about fingers, knuckles, having a little popping noise. Some people find that relieving, some people find it outright grotesque to a certain point. I've seen people cringe with that kind of noise. But it comes down to it, is it harmful, is it helpful, is it really kind of unknown? So first let's tackle the big question, what is that popping noise? So some people assume or believe that it is the bones grinding down on each other, and that's what we get this popping noise, and after so long the bones grinding down can cause arthritis. Let's tackle all of these right now. So first off, that noise has nothing to do with the bone touching bone. Even when through x-rays, when they say bone on bone, there's almost always a little bit of a space or a little bit of cartilage there in between. So the rubbing, that friction, is not causing the sound. So what the sound is coming from appears to be when the gas is forming when we cause a distraction or we move something fast enough, kind of like when you throw a rock into a pond and you get a little bit of a bubble noise. A gas bubble forms and then dissipates quickly. When the bubble pops, it's a little just forms of gases. That's what's making the noise. It gets really interesting that sometimes these noises can be a lot louder than you would expect. Sometimes one of the loudest noises I've heard, these little cavitations from adjustment, was actually from where the clavicle meets the shoulder, up at the acromioclavicular joint, kind of right on the inside of your shoulder. It didn't say anything at the time, but it actually startled me when I did this to somebody. The noises that these popping can make to cause in terms of decibels and actually how loud it can get is research showed it can actually get to 83 decibels, which doesn't really mean much until you translate to it's about as loud as what a diesel truck traveling at 40 miles an hour sounds like. It's a loud noise, not the type of noise, but how loud that is. So think of standing next to a truck as it zooms by. It can get quite loud. But again, that popping noise is not at all required to have a successful adjustment because some places are just much less likely to make that noise. It really just comes down to how the joint is made, what direction, and how fast it has to move. Though there are also plenty of techniques and styles of adjusting out there that all but guarantees or really inhibits the chances of having those noises. Again, it comes down to what does the patient or client want specifically. So if someone doesn't want to hear the popping noise of their neck, but I feel like they really need adjusted, we'll talk about it and go ahead and find a method that works best for them. So I already kind of insinuated this one a little bit, but let's go in this a little bit more in depth about knuckles, fingers and toes. So don't crack your fingers, it'll give you arthritis. I remember hearing that a lot as a kid and even in my young adult life, and most of us have heard this, and most of us has believed it, or at least to some extent. So the good news is that this idea of repetitious knuckle cracking causing long-term problems has kind of been debunked on several studies. Because it doesn't show one, they have studies where they had people that were never adjusted their knuckles or cracked them, and then people who were addicted to the noise and the sound. They take x-rays over many years, 10, 20, 30 years, and they saw no difference in causes of arthritis from those who always crack their knuckles to those who don't. So that's the good news. There is a little bit of an inflammatory response that can happen depending on how you crack your knuckles. And there are two main ways of doing it. One way is kind of make a loose fist, so to speak, flexing knuckles in and then pressing down on them. That's one way to do it. That way has shown to eventually wear out the cartilage a little bit and can eventually cause some problems with grip strength. But it doesn't have to do with tearing down the muscle or causing arthritis. What it has to do is just the way that we crack those knuckles by pushing down is that ever so slightly it causes a little stretch reflex of the joint capsule and the ligaments that are around those finger joints. So think about us taking a rubber band and every day, once, twice, 3 times, quickly just stretching it a little bit. Not too much, not yanking really hard, just barely going a little bit more than it wants to go naturally. Well, doing that over time, every couple times a day for a couple of weeks, couple months, couple years, will start causing that rubber band or the joint capsules in your fingers to get a little overstretched, a little hypermobile. And with hypermobility or increased range of motion, we lose stability or strength. So we can end up losing a little bit of grip strength when done that way. So the way I'd recommend doing, if you really have to get out that knuckle crackling, is to distract or really just pull a finger. So you can also grab and just yank, and causing that distraction of making the gas noise pop still tends to cause the relief that people need to with the fingers, or get the little crack addict sound out of the way so they feel satisfied with it. And it doesn't appear to wear down on the cartilage at all, so it just seems to be a slight safer method of doing it, and this way you can retain all of your grip strength. So next, I guess, comes down to is why do people crack their knuckles? So it is very individualistic. Most of the time it starts off with some sort of pain, discomfort, or tightness, and someone just does it and is, it's relaxing, it's relieving, it feels better. However, a lot of us probably knows at least one of those people or more than one of those people that are chronic finger snappers, and they just do it all day long without thinking. It really can become addicting. Not necessarily because it's always relieving. I mean, people do it 5, 6, 7 times a day. Most of the time they're not doing it to relieve any pain. They're just doing it because they're addicted to the sound, or it's become a subconscious habit. Just like somebody licking their lips or chewing their fingernails. Habits can be formed. However, there does appear to be real reasons why people do it, especially if you just look at statistics. I mean, over 50% of the U.S. population at least semi-regularly cracks their knuckles. When you look at more of the demographics, men appear to do a little bit more, but the bigger factor is people who do it most are those who, non-surprisingly, work with their hands the most. Massage therapists, receptionists, people who are typing all the time, construction workers, again, people who are constantly using their hands. They get really tight, all that buildup of scar tissue, and sometimes having that little release makes a huge difference. Again, if it's painful, it might not be a bad idea to do it, again, by pulling and distracting the finger joints. The problem becomes when you're just doing it out of habit or just because you like the sound or you're doing it to gross out, the person next to you. So, I mean, if there's some pain and cracking the knuckles every once in a while helps relieve it, there's probably not a big deal with it, and you definitely do not have to worry about it causing any major issues like arthritis down the road. So it appears to be safe. But let's go into a little bit other parts of our body. So self-adjusting the spine is something else that's very commonly happen. But something I want to tackle first. So I'm saying self-adjusting or making those popping noise, whether it's your lumbar, low back, your mid-back, or your neck. I'm right now referring to the idea of when you do it purposefully. Not, you're just moving and it happens to pop on itself. I don't want you to go, oh geez, did I just do it? I'm referring to when you do it purposefully. So again, usually the reason why people do this is that they're in some sort of pain or discomfort. And we'll hit a few of the more common ones first, such as that mid-back thoracic pain. Again, most of us have probably seen, done, or had this done before, where you need the mid-back adjusted, so they'll get someone to come do like a lifting bear hug and squeeze. Or if you've ever had or seen someone ask their young child or a niece or nephew to walk up and down their back to get it to pop and crack. These are some of those methods of self-adjusting. And I don't recommend it. Not in the least. The only time I would say it is okay, and the few times that I've done it, is that when it is painful and that I don't have someone else around who is skilled and trained to do so properly. So again, when you have someone that just does it, we'll call it non-specific, just kind of like lifts, bear hugs, and pulls, or has someone walk across your back, they're not at all being specific at which bones are being moved, what direction they're moving, and let alone, is it safe to adjust someone? So in general, chiropractic adjustments are very safe, but there's a reason why we always do physical exams. It's to make sure that there isn't a strong chance of having any adverse effects from it. Because if a friend asks you to adjust their low back or pop their mid back, they don't know if you have a herniated discs, or maybe you have a nerve that's impinged, and maybe if they do it, it's going to exacerbate, make the issue work. So it just comes down to it's not the safest to do, and it's really not recommended. Leading into one that gets me a lot is when people adjust their own necks. I've had many friends actually, that do it, and I do scold them and give them the stare down when they do it, especially when they do it in front of me. I mean, come on, I'm literally right here in front of you. Don't do it to yourself. But anyway, leading to everything that we talked about before, let's talk about self-adjusting the neck. So I've seen people do it in many different ways, anything from taking kind of like a fist on their jaw and pushing one direction, or taking both their hands and making this very large momentum, twisting motion, or even just rolling their head around. Again, these are non-specific. You have 7 vertebrae in your neck. Each vertebra is attached to about 3 to 5 different joints. You do not know which one you're moving or in which direction. And in terms of, again, when you do it non-specific, going a little bit further than it should, back to our rubber band example of pulling the fingers or snapping them, and that rubber band gets a little looser, a little less stable, joint starts getting hypermobile. And with the fingers, you can start losing grip strength. Well, one of the last things we want with our neck is instability. I mean, that becomes a major issue. I mean, not only is our neck literally what holds up our head, which holds one of the largest parts of our central nervous system, the brain, but it also is the channel for our spinal cord from the brain. That's something we want to have a very firm, strong grasp on, so we do not want to keep self-adjusting to make it where it becomes hypermobile. Which kind of leads into a question I just imagine someone asking me right now is, what about if a chiropractor adjusts? Can they adjust too much in the neck to where this becomes an issue? And there's been no studies of someone getting adjusted every day or repetitively just because it becomes an issue. Since we don't know if it's a problem, it's better to look at it retrospective of have people who've been adjusted many times, more than the average. Do they seem to have any issues? And it doesn't appear so. Again, it comes down to the specificity. When a chiropractor is adjusting your neck, they're on one level and they know what direction they're going. As opposed to if you do a gross movement on yourself, even though you get a relief of pain, which is really just from endorphins being released to try to slow down the pain reflex, science is showing you're not really adjusting the level that you think you are. It's almost always the one above or below it. So it's why you get that short-term relief, and then usually the pain comes back. So people adjust themselves again. And the more often you do it, even though you're getting decreased pain, you tend to have to do it more. And again, this only appears to be a problem when you're doing it yourself. So it kind of turns into the same concept as the whole opioid epidemic, where people take them, it lowers the pain threshold, so they have to take more, and they're being hooked on it. I mean, the last thing you want to is to be hooked on any sort of treatment, especially if it's a self-treatment. So again, just to touch a little bit more on stability it really just becomes important. As our neck becomes less stable, our muscles aren't going to be able to get as strong. They actually start to atrophy and diminish a little bit over time. And we need those muscles and those ligaments always strong and taut. So that way everything that goes through our neck and then through the upper arm, pretty much all of our nerves that go to the upper extremity, all the major blood vessels, arteries, and veins, we want them to be strong and protected. So again, having a nice, strong, stable neck is a big deal. Otherwise, you might start getting symptoms such as headaches is a major one, burning neck pain. You might end up getting some peripheral neuropathies, numbness, tingling, sharp pain going down the arms or even down the neck and the mid-back. And trying to fix stability is far more difficult than preventing it in the first place, which is kind of true for most things, and it doesn't all waver here. And then just another small problem you end up having is, again, unfortunately, most of us at some point has sprained either, let's say, our wrist or our ankle, sometimes repetitively. And we'll use an ankle sprain, because it's relatively common. What that is usually we twist it in the wrong direction, we overstretch a ligament, and then we have a sprain. And a lot of times, the foot for the longest while isn't necessarily deformed, but it's like everted or pronated, pushed out to the side a little bit, and it changes the biomechanic. And that can happen with just one ankle sprain. So to ease into the idea with the neck is you can sprain your neck as well if you push it in a wrong direction with too much force. And the last thing we want, again, is any long-term issues, because all you were trying to do is get yourself out of pain is happening to not be in the best way possible. So just to kind of wrap it up a little bit, so in general, cracking your knuckles, it appears to be fine. You can overdo it over time and it might cause a few little grip issues, but it in itself does not appear to cause any increased chances of arthritis or other issues of the hand of that nature. Cracking your own back, not recommended, not at all. All of us are guilty of it to some extent. I remember I've done it once or twice the last few years in the mid-back, and every once in a while I'll admit it, I've gotten my own shoulders once or twice. But again, it's only when I'm in pain and I don't have someone else to do it. But even then, that's not a good excuse. It's really not. It's kind of the idea of I would love to do my own root canal, but even if I had the ability to it just doesn't seem like a good idea, and it's not something I'm going to get into. So, self-adjusting, if you really need it, stretching is going to be a far better way. It's something you can do on your own to kind of help relax pain, relax the muscles, and get yourself to just kind of hold off until you can get in somewhere to get a full examination. Which, by the way, if you are a chronic self-adjuster, you know one, or you're just having any sort of spinal or extremity joint pain, always feel free to book an appointment here at Functionised. We'll take a look at you and do it again to use the whole FIT team and get you as functionized as possible. Also, as always, if you do enjoy the material we're putting out, we kindly request you to put an honest 5-star review. It really does help us. And then, as always, direct message us if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to hear about, any questions that you have. We'll give a little shout out for you, and it'll give us something more specific to you. Feel free to direct message us at Functionized, either on Facebook or Instagram, or you can always email us at functionized.com. Go to the website, check it out. So, as always, all of our podcasts are up there, not just mine, but as well as the Mad Scientist, Jim, Shantae's, Christine's. You can get them all on your iTunes, on every Android podcast app. We're pretty much everywhere, so feel free to check us out. And, well, until next time, I'm going to wrap this up and say I'm Dr. Mike. I'm out. Thank you.